Ever wondered what makes the Bible's greatest heroes have unbelievable faith? What if you could develop that same faith to move mountains in your own life? Let's uncover how 5 extraordinary Bible characters can teach us to unlock powerful faith. Faith can move mountains. But what does that actually mean for us today? Through the stories of 5 Bible characters, we'll uncover the secrets of how they developed incredible faith that defied all odds, and how we too can nurture this same type of faith in our own lives. Throughout this video, we'll dive deep into the lives of 5 biblical heroes: Abraham, Moses, Rahab, the bleeding woman, and the Centurion, exploring their faith journeys and learning practical lessons we can apply to strengthen our own trust in God. 1. Abraham, the father of faith. Abraham's journey of faith is a powerful example of trusting God even when circumstances make no sense. Often referred to as the father of faith, Abraham's story begins with his doubts and struggles, showing us that faith isn't about perfection, but about trust and obedience. In Genesis 12, God calls Abraham to leave his home and go to a land that he will show him. This was a massive step of faith, but Abraham's journey didn't start out perfect. In Egypt, he fears for his life and lies about Sarah, his wife, saying she's his sister. He doubts God's protection, and as a result, Sarah is taken by Pharaoh. Later, in Genesis 16, Abraham grows even older without receiving the promised child. He and Sarah take matters into their own hands and try to fulfill God's promise through Hagar, Sarah's servant, leading to the birth of Ishmael. Abraham's doubts surface again as he struggles with God's timing. Despite his imperfections and moments of fear, Abraham obeyed God's call. God had promised him a son, and though Abraham laughed in disbelief when told his wife would bear him a child in her old age, Genesis 17, he continued to obey. This is the first lesson about faith. You can have doubts, but if you obey God's word, your faith will grow stronger. The pinnacle of Abraham's faith came in Genesis 22, when God asked him to sacrifice his son Isaac, the child of promise. Abraham had no idea how this was going to work out, but his faith in God's ability to fulfill his promises, even if it meant raising Isaac from the dead, was unwavering. Hebrews 11 highlights this incredible faith, saying that Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. Hebrews chapter 11:19. Abraham's story teaches us that faith isn't the absence of doubt, but the willingness to act in obedience despite uncertainty. Through every trial and test, Abraham's faith grew as he continued to trust God and follow his commands. Faith is built through obedience, even when doubts arise. Trusting God's word and acting on it despite uncertainty is how our faith grows and becomes unshakable. 2. Moses, reluctant leader, unshakable faith. Moses, one of the greatest leaders in biblical history, exemplified unwavering faith, despite his initial reluctance and self-doubt. Called by God to free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, Moses' story is filled with moments where his faith was tested and where he questioned God's plan. But it's through these challenges that we see what true faith looks like in action. In Exodus 3, Moses encounters God in the burning bush, where God commissions him to lead his people out of Egypt. Initially, Moses hesitates. He doubts his abilities, feeling unworthy and unqualified. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" he asks. Exodus 3:11. Moses wrestles with fear, insecurity, and even anger at being chosen for such a monumental task. Yet, despite his fears, God reassures him by promising his presence. Moses' faith begins to grow as he obeys, although his doubts remain. In Exodus 14, Moses faces another enormous challenge, the Red Sea. With Pharaoh's army closing in, the Israelites are trapped, and panic sets in. The people turn on Moses, questioning why he led them into this situation. But Moses, relying on God's promises, speaks with confidence. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." Exodus 14:13. With the waters before him and an army behind, Moses stretches out his hand, and God parts the Red Sea, leading the Israelites to safety. Moses' faith was not just about performing miracles, it was about trusting God's promises and acting on them, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. His faith grew as he relied on God for guidance, provision, and protection, and despite the many obstacles, he never stopped trusting in God's ultimate plan for his people. This teaches us an essential lesson. Faith isn't always about immediate victory or success. It's about trusting God's promises, even when the road ahead seems uncertain. Moses faced countless setbacks and doubts, yet he kept moving forward in obedience, believing that God would provide. In our own lives, we often encounter giants, difficult situations that seem impossible to overcome. Like Moses, we are called to trust in God's promises and stand firm in faith, knowing that He will make a way, even when we don't see one. Faith grows when we put our trust in God, even when everything around us suggests failure. 3. Rahab. Faith, despite the odds. Rahab's story is one of the most remarkable examples of faith in the Bible. She was a prostitute, a Gentile woman living in the city of Jericho, an enemy of Israel. Yet Rahab's faith not only saved her life, but also placed her in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Matthew chapter 1:5. Her story shows us that faith isn't bound by background or status. It's about trusting in the character and power of God, even when the odds are stacked against us. In Joshua 2, Israel's spies enter Jericho, and Rahab hides them from the king's men, risking her life in the process. But what's even more incredible is her reasoning. She tells the spies, "I know that the Lord has given you this land. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." Joshua 2:9-11. Despite her pagan upbringing, Rahab had heard of God's mighty works, how He parted the Red Sea for Israel, how He brought them victory over powerful nations. Rahab's faith was rooted in the power of God, not in her direct experience, but in what she had heard and believed about Him. Rahab's faith is extraordinary because it was based on the testimony of others. She didn't have a personal encounter with God like Moses or Abraham, yet her belief in His power was enough for her to act in faith. By hiding the spies and helping them escape, she not only saved her family but also demonstrated trust in the promises of the God of Israel. Rahab's action wasn't based on knowledge but on the conviction that God's power could change her life. This is a powerful lesson for us. Sometimes our faith doesn't require direct revelation or signs from God. Like Rahab, we can develop faith based on what we've heard about God and His works. Our faith grows when we believe in His ability to transform our circumstances, even when we have no tangible proof. Rahab's story teaches us that faith doesn't require a perfect past or a spotless reputation. It's about trusting in God's character and believing that He can work in our lives, no matter where we come from. In our own lives, we may face situations where we don't see a clear path forward. Like Rahab, we must trust in God's promises and take action, even when it feels risky. Faith often calls us to step out of our comfort zones, to believe in God's power even when we don't have all the answers. Just like Rahab, we are called to place our trust in the One who is able to do the impossible. 4. The bleeding woman. Believing in the impossible. The story of the bleeding woman, found in Mark 5:25-34, is a powerful example of faith in action. This woman had suffered for 12 years, dealing with a condition that made her ceremonially unclean according to Jewish law. She had spent all her money on doctors, yet nothing had worked. She was desperate, hopeless, and considered an outcast in society. But she had one last hope: Jesus. Hearing about the miracles Jesus performed, she believed that He could heal her. Her faith wasn't based on a direct invitation from Jesus, or even a promise. It was rooted in a conviction that if she could just touch His clothes, she would be healed. In the midst of a crowd, she made her way to Jesus and touched the hem of His garment. Immediately, she was healed. What makes her faith stand out is the boldness of her belief. She didn't wait for Jesus to notice her or call her forward. She took action based on what she believed about Him. The crowd was pressing in on Jesus, yet she moved with determination and faith. She trusted that even the smallest contact with him would heal her. When Jesus felt the power leave him, he stopped and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples, thinking it was absurd, pointed out the large crowd, but Jesus knew someone had touched him in faith. When the woman stepped forward, trembling, she explained what had happened. Jesus responded, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Mark 5:34. The woman's faith teaches us several key lessons. First, faith requires action. It's not enough to believe from a distance. We must act on our beliefs. Second, faith isn't about having the right conditions or a perfect setup. This woman was desperate. She had no status or social approval, but she believed that Jesus could do the impossible. Her faith also reminds us that when we believe in Jesus' power, we must trust that he will respond. Her healing wasn't a random accident. It was a direct result of her faith in Jesus. She believed in his power to heal, and because of her trust, she received the healing she sought. In our own lives, we may face situations that feel hopeless or beyond repair. We might be physically, emotionally, or spiritually drained, just as this woman was. But like her, we can approach Jesus with the belief that he can do the impossible. Faith may seem like a small step, but when placed in Jesus, it has the power to bring healing, restoration, and peace. The bleeding woman's faith shows us that even in the most desperate circumstances, God is able to make the impossible possible. 5. The Centurion, faith in authority. The story of the centurion's faith, found in Matthew 8:5-13, is a striking example of faith in God's authority. A Roman officer, a centurion, approached Jesus with an urgent request. His servant was paralyzed and suffering terribly. Jesus, always willing to help, immediately offered to come to the centurion's house and heal him. But the centurion's response surprised everyone. He told Jesus that he was not worthy to have him enter his home. Instead, he believed that Jesus could heal his servant from a distance. He explained, "For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes." Matthew 8:9. The centurion understood authority. He recognized that Jesus had the same kind of authority over the spiritual realm that he had over his soldiers in the physical realm. He didn't need Jesus to be physically present for the healing to happen. He trusted in Jesus' power and authority. Jesus was amazed by the centurion's faith and said to those around him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." Matthew chapters 8:10. The centurion's faith was so profound that Jesus declared his belief as a model for others to follow. This story reveals a powerful lesson. Faith isn't about proximity or physical presence. It's about trusting in God's supreme authority. The centurion didn't need to see Jesus perform the miracle with his own eyes. He simply believed that Jesus had the power to heal his servant, no matter where he was. His understanding of authority showed a deep trust in Jesus' word and power. For us today, this story challenges us to examine how we view God's authority in our lives. The centurion had no doubt that Jesus could command the situation from wherever he was. How often do we limit our faith by thinking God needs to be right in front of us, or that we need to see immediate results? Like the centurion, we must learn to trust God's authority, knowing that he is able to work in any circumstance, even without our immediate understanding or intervention. In our own faith journeys, God's authority is the foundation upon which our trust can stand. The centurion's faith teaches us that God's power is not restricted by time, space, or our human limitations. We can trust in his ability to act on our behalf, no matter where we are or what we face. Faith, like the centurion's, is rooted in recognizing God's authority over every aspect of our lives. Conclusion. Today, we've explored 5 Bible characters whose faith was truly extraordinary. From Abraham's obedience amidst doubts to the centurion's unwavering trust in God's authority, each of these heroes teaches us valuable lessons on what it means to have true, unshakable faith. The key takeaway here is that faith isn't about having all the answers or being perfect in our trust. It's about obedience, believing in God's promises, and recognizing His power and authority. Whether it's stepping out in faith like Moses, trusting in God's character like Rahab, or taking bold action like the bleeding woman, each of these stories highlights how we too can develop a faith that moves mountains. As you reflect on these characters, remember, your faith doesn't need to be flawless, it just needs to be active. Like these heroes, you too can trust God, even when life feels uncertain. Embrace the journey of faith, knowing that God is always with you, guiding you through each step. If you've been inspired by these faith heroes, take a moment to reflect on your own faith journey. How can you apply their lessons to your life today? Don't be afraid to trust in God's power and take steps of faith, no matter how big or small. If this video encouraged you, share it with someone who might need a reminder about the power of faith. Comment below with your thoughts. What lesson from these characters stood out the most to you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more content that will help you grow in your walk with God. Together, let's keep building our faith and trusting in the incredible power of God's promises.